On the morning after her husband's funeral, Laya Hart is thrown out of her own home in front of neighbours who suddenly can't meet her eyes. She leaves Leavenworth with a 6-year-old girl, a failing bundle, and one Winchester 1866 that still smells like him. No help, no mercy, just winter and a family already signing papers to erase her. 3 days later, she finds a cave with unfrozen water and fish, then a plank carved with her husband's initials. Years old. What was he hiding, and who will kill to keep it buried? Stay until the end. The day after the funeral, Laya Hart learns that grief is something other people grow tired of very quickly. The house is still thick with the smell of black coffee and cold bread when her in-laws arrive, coats buttoned, expressions already settled into courtesy. They do not ask how she slept or whether June ate. Her mother-in-law, Ruth Hart, pauses near the table where yesterday's condolence pies still sit untouched and smooths her gloves as if preparing for church. "We agreed you could stay until the burial," she says, voice measured, almost gentle. Laya answers quietly, reminding her that the ground was frozen, that arrangements took time, that this was still her home. Ruth does not look at her. She looks past her, toward the bedroom door, toward the stove, toward things she has already mentally reclaimed. Outside, neighbors linger longer than necessary, pretending to adjust reins or discuss the weather. June presses closer to Laya's side, fingers twisting fabric until her knuckles pale. When Silas Hart steps forward, he clears his throat and says loud enough to carry, "It's time now." Someone nearby folds a copy of the Leavenworth Times, creasing it neatly, the paper snapping once in the cold air. Laya notices how no one meets her eyes. Not the woman who borrowed sugar every week, not the man whose barn her husband helped raise. She understands with a dull certainty that this is not about law or kindness, it is about comfort, and she is no longer convenient. She packs while they wait. Not everything, just what she can tie together with twine found in a drawer that used to hold her husband's spare nails. June asks, in a small voice, whether they are visiting Aunt Clara, and Laya lies without hesitation, telling her they are going on a walk first. She lifts the dented cooking pot from the hook, feeling its familiar weight, and wraps a loaf of bread in cloth. When she reaches for the rifle, Silas shifts, just slightly. "That stays," he says. Laya looks at him then, really looks, and replies, "It was my husband's." There is a pause, long enough for the neighbors to lean in without seeming to. Silas steps back. The Winchester 1866 feels colder than it should when she lifts it. The brass receiver dull with age, but solid, dependable. Outside, the Missouri River breathes fog into the street, swallowing boots and wagon wheels alike. Laya steps into it without looking back. She could knock on a dozen doors before sunset, could stand at the Methodist church and accept whatever kindness survived obligation. Instead, she turns east, then south, toward the bluffs beyond Fort Leavenworth, where soldiers come and go and no one asks questions if you keep walking. She knows the danger. If anyone notes her leaving town with purpose, Silas will say she abandoned the place. The law listens to men like him. By the second night, the cold has found every weakness. June's boots leak, and Laya gives her own socks to the child without comment. They share bread in careful bites, counting without saying numbers. June coughs, then hides her mouth, as if ashamed of the sound. "It's just the air," she whispers, repeating something she once heard Laya say to her father. Laya nods, though fear sits heavy behind her breastbone. On the third day, the land folds in on itself, rock rising where trees thin, and Laya spots the dark cut of an opening she almost walks past. Inside, the ground slopes gently and the air is damp but still. She steps carefully, rifle raised, heart hammering with the memory of stories told by lantern light. Then she hears it, water moving steadily, not frozen, not rushing away. She kneels and sees fish shift beneath the surface, real and unmistakable. Her hands shake as she touches the water, cold but alive. June stares, then laughs once, sharp and surprised, before clamping her mouth shut, as if laughter itself might offend whatever gave them this mercy. Laya presses her forehead to June's hair and breathes, slow and deliberate, feeling the first crack in the wall that has been holding her upright since the door closed behind them. They build no fire that first night. Laya is careful, thinking of smoke, of eyes. She breaks bread, dips it briefly in water, and lets June sleep with her head on Laya's thigh. In the morning, she explores deeper, marking turns with small scratches of her knife. It is while clearing a dry corner, testing stones with her weight, that her hand catches on a plank wedged between rocks. The wood is old, warped, and it takes effort to free it. When it comes loose, flakes of dried mud fall away, revealing carved letters. Her husband's initials. Not hurried, not shallow, made by someone who expected the wood to last. Laya sits back hard, the plank across her knees, memories rearranging themselves without permission. Trips he took alone. Stories that never quite lined up. June watches her face carefully. "Mama?" she asks. Laya swallows and says only, "Your father was here once." She does not say what that means. She does not know yet. She wraps the plank in cloth and tucks it away like something fragile and dangerous at once. The cave is no longer just shelter. It is evidence. That night, Laya speaks to June softly about promises, about staying until the ice loosens its grip, about walking to Topeka when the roads open, to the stone building people say listens to the truth if you stand long enough. June nods, trusting not the plan, but the voice saying it. Outside, the world continues without them, papers folded, decisions made. Inside, Laya sharpens her knife, checks the rifle, counts cartridges twice. She does not cry. She does not pray aloud. She watches her daughter sleep and commits every line of her face to memory, knowing this moment, this cave, this knowledge will change everything that comes after. The cave teaches Laya a different way to count time, not by dates or Sundays, but by what she manages to hold together. One fire catches without wasting a match, and that becomes a good day. A fish pulled from the cold water with a bent hook, and a line twisted from old fibers becomes a small triumph she does not celebrate out loud. She clears a corner where the ground stays mostly dry and builds a rough inner shelter from branches, mud, and stacked stone, not because it will make them comfortable, but because 4 walls, even crooked ones, give the mind something to lean against. June watches closely, handing her thin sticks, mimicking the way Laya presses mud into gaps, copying movements before understanding purpose. "Is this our house?" June asks once, not hopeful, not afraid, just curious. Laya answers honestly, "For now." At night, when June stares toward the cave opening too long, Laya pretends not to notice, because noticing would mean naming the absence. Instead, she tells June stories about Topeka, about buildings made of stone, where people argue with words instead of fists, and June listens as if those words are food. Silence settles between them, not empty, but shared. And slowly June learns that quiet does not always mean loss. While Laya learns survival by repetition, Silas Hart works by habit. In Leavenworth, he moves through offices and parlors with the ease of a man who belongs. He stops by the county clerk's desk, as if by accident, comments on the cold, asks after someone's wife. He brings folded papers with him, never unfolded all the way, never urgent. "She left," he says more than once, shrugging lightly as if explaining weather. Some people nod, some hesitate. A few avert their eyes but still sign. He knows who to ask and who not to. He never says Laya's name with anger, only with disappointment, as though she has embarrassed them all by failing quietly. By the time the snow thins along the roads, he has statements, affidavits, and the beginning of something that looks official. He reads the Leavenworth Times in the evenings, scanning for mention of a widow who never made herself known, and finds comfort in the absence. Ink dries. Paper waits. Winter, he believes, will finish the rest. Inside the cave, Laya fights back with what she has, which is memory and stubbornness. She keeps records, not pretty ones, not ones a judge would recognize, but ones she understands. She scratches dates into a flat stone with the tip of her knife, careful to count days twice. She ties knots into a strip of cloth, one for each week, explaining to June what each knot means. "This one is when you stopped coughing at night," she says, touching one gently. The plank with her husband's initials stays wrapped in oilcloth, hidden behind stones, where June cannot reach it while playing. Laya teaches June words that matter, quietly, steadily, the way you teach prayers. "We were here," June repeats, not knowing why it feels important. When June shivers, Laya pulls her close and speaks of Topeka again, of the Kansas State House rising solid and unmoving, of standing there together and saying their names out loud. She does not promise victory. She promises presence. June accepts this without question, because children trust consistency more than hope. The collapse comes late in the season, when Laya has begun to believe they understand the cave. It happens without warning, stone shifting where it never has before. Dust fills the air, and the entrance narrows enough to turn Laya's thoughts sharp and fast. June panics, grabbing at her coat, crying out once before biting the sound back. For a heartbeat, Laya is back in the street in Leavenworth, watching faces turn away. The same helplessness tries to take hold. She forces it down, kneels, and presses her forehead to June's. "Look at me," she says, steadying her voice before her hands. "Stay with me." They move rocks together, not frantically but carefully, knowing wasted strength is danger. They wait, when waiting is the only choice. When the dust settles, the opening is smaller, but the cave holds warmth better, hides itself more completely. Laya understands the irony immediately. What nearly trapped them has also made them safer. She does not tell June this part, only says, "We're still here." In the quiet that follows, Laya looks at the Winchester differently. It is not comfort. It is a line drawn in the dirt, a warning she hopes never to use. She cleans it methodically, counting cartridges, knowing exactly how few there are. June asks once if the gun will keep them safe. Laya answers, "It helps people listen." Time presses harder now. If Silas reaches Topeka first, papers will speak louder than survival ever could. The cave can feed them, shelter them, keep them breathing, but it cannot restore what was taken. Laya knows this, and knowing it hurts more than the cold ever did. Still, each morning she wakes June, marks another day on stone, tightens another knot, and repeats the promise. They will leave when the road allows it. They will not disappear quietly. Spring did not arrive as a burst of color or warmth, but as a reluctant guest, uncertain if it was truly welcome. The snow clung to corners like regret, and the Missouri River, swollen and loud, seemed to rush faster, as if it too wanted to wash away what had been done. Laya and June left the cave with movements that belonged to people who expected the ground to betray them. Their footsteps were careful, deliberate. They passed the broken tree where Laya had once hung wet clothes, the rock where June used to sit while snapping fish bones in half with curiosity. The silence between them was not the silence of distance, but of mutual understanding. They had not spoken of the carved plank since the night it was hidden again behind a wall of stacked stone. That was a thing they carried without naming. When they walked, June did not ask for rest. Laya did not offer. Their bodies spoke for them, their pace tuned not to comfort but to survival. And when they finally stepped back into the thin civilization of Fort Leavenworth, past the western edge where Grant Avenue met Metropolitan, it felt like a different kind of wilderness altogether. Fort Leavenworth pulsed like its own small city, soldiers moving in and out, civilians weaving through in long coats, the smell of tobacco and horses thick in the air. Laya did not linger. She kept June close, head down, steps steady. In front of the commissary, a young man was playing harmonica, a tin cup at his feet. June paused for half a second, long enough for Laya to murmur, "Keep walking." At the corner by Grant Avenue, she heard it. Her brother-in-law's name, Silas Hart, mentioned in passing by a man wearing a Kansas National Guard pin, discussing a property affidavit someone brought into the courthouse. Laya didn't stop, didn't flinch, but her grip on the rifle case tightened. They found an old farmer near the supply yard who accepted a fish hook in exchange for road information. "Topeka's 2 days if the mud doesn't slow you," he said, "and it will." He pointed to the horizon as if it held judgment. Laya thanked him, barely meeting his eyes, already committing distances to memory, recalling the paper map she once saw tacked inside her father's barn 20 years earlier. They left without sleep. The city did not remember them, and they needed it that way. Topeka was not what Laya expected. The buildings were taller, the noise sharper, streetcars clattered past, a boy called out headlines from the steps of the Topeka Daily Capital, and a woman passed with a basket of eggs and a baby strapped to her chest. It was a city that moved around her, not for her. When she saw the Kansas State House rise into view, its dome still burnished from repairs years earlier, she stopped. June bumped into her side. "Is that it?" the girl asked. Laya only nodded. She had seen it before in ink sketches, on letters pinned in courthouse halls. Up close, the stone was smoother than she imagined, the structure both solid and indifferent. She climbed the steps without adjusting her coat, leaving wet boot prints behind her. June followed in silence, watching her mother more than the building. They crossed the marble foyer slowly, unnoticed by men in wool suits and women with ribbons pinned neatly to their collars. Laya spoke to no one at first. She went straight to the clerk's desk and said, "I'm here to contest an affidavit concerning the Hart property in Leavenworth County." The man blinked. She added, "I have evidence." The words sounded small but settled heavy. When the hearing was called, the room filled not with spectators, but with weight. Laya stepped forward with June beside her, laying out her record, stone markings, knotted cloth, the plank with carved initials. Each item carried its own silence, louder than argument. The clerk raised an eyebrow. Another man, older, leaned forward. "That carving," he said slowly, "was done years ago. I know that hand. That's Eli Hart's." Silas shifted in his seat. Laya did not look at him. "He took me there once," she said, though she knew he hadn't. It was not a lie. It was protection. Silas opened his mouth, but the older man raised a hand. "Let her finish." Laya continued, explaining how no one had seen her leave, how she had stayed within county lines, how she had made notes by hand because there had been no other choice. She did not cry. She did not beg. When June reached up and took her hand without being told, something in the room changed. The people there had seen land disputes before, but they had not seen this. A girl who had not eaten meat in weeks, standing next to her mother, calm, steady, unashamed. It was not a legal argument. It was human. Outside the chamber, Laya sat on a bench, exhausted beyond words. June leaned against her. Across the hall, a woman approached. "Mary Caldwell," she said gently. "I teach at Kansas Avenue School." Her voice held no pity, only recognition. "She yours?" she asked, glancing at June. "Yes." Laya straightened. "We're between places." Mary knelt, unwrapped a cloth bundle, and handed June a biscuit, still warm. "You can stay with me," she said. No flourish, no condition. Laya opened her mouth to refuse, but June looked up at her with eyes that had learned not to ask for much. The refusal died before it was spoken. "One night," Laya said, "then we'll see." Mary smiled. "That's usually how it starts." She gave them an address, 412 Huntoon Street, a narrow home near a quiet alley lined with ash trees, and said, "We'll go after this." That night, the house smelled of bread and lamp oil. The bed was small but clean, the sheets rough but warm. Laia lay awake long after June slept, listening not for danger, but for silence, and felt something she had not felt in months: possibility. Weeks passed like the beginning of a new season, not fast, not easy, but forward. The hearing came again, and this time the ruling gave Laia back her legal ground, not as widow or burden, but as rightful tenant with protection. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. She would not be erased. On the morning when the river ran clear, Laia took June back to the bank, the same Missouri but different now. They stood side by side, and Laia pulled the plank from her pack. She handed it to June. "This," she said, voice rough, "is proof we existed even when no one wanted to look." June held it with care, cradling it like something sacred. "Will we have a home that no one can take?" she asked. Laia didn't answer right away. She watched the water, always moving, never breaking. "I won't promise a place," she said finally, "but I'll promise a life." June nodded once, as if that was more than enough, and this time it was. What did this story make you feel or remember? Tell us in the comments. We read every one. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a like. It truly helps us keep creating these heartfelt stories with care. And if you'd like more, watch another video on our channel and share which one touched you most.